is that Brian and I, our original idea was that we were never going to say Watergate, ever, and that, you know, we were going to ask the viewer to like bring that to the story, which is a really nice idea, but didn't really work. No, and what happened was that viewers didn't trust us. You know, it's sort of like, what do you not know? You know, like you found these home movies. Yeah, kids these days. Like you found these home movies and you're like, what a bunch of nice guys. And we were like, no, we think that you know, and we think that you should do. Never mind. Like it didn't work. And that was sort of still what was going on when we came to Fancisco. We were trying desperately to avoid making like another Nixon movie that hit all the same points as every other Nixon movie, because the whole point of these home movies is that they were new and supposed to be different. So the balancing act, I think, for us really in the end was twofold. It was one was how much Watergate is enough, because you know every other Nixon movie is just about Watergate. So like we kind of think you know a lot of this already. We do think our audience is intelligent, and then B, like how to make this very personal story come through when people are used to thinking about this story very differently in a kind of bigger picture historical way. Like how do you make people care about Haldeman, Ehrlichman, and Chapin in the midst of all this like important historical stuff? We planned that campaign for 3 months. I think that's really important to say, like 3 months of like serious thought. And the first thing we did was we created an email list. We went on MailChimp. We set up a free email list service. It's fantastic. And the two of us literally sat for weeks and thought about, we had both been making films for a long time. And so I'd never done this before. This was a great kick in the pants. Like all the programmers who'd ever shown my films at film festivals, all the curators who'd ever written about Brian's films or put his film in the Whitney Permanent Collection, like all our friends and family and everything else. So we started off with a personal email list of about 1,200 people, I think, between the two of us. Being able to combine was really good, because I probably didn't have, like each of us only had 600. So anyway, but we also had a plan to just like send, we realized that, you know, who needs content? Everyone on the internet. And like sending someone a short, like blog ready, like, hey, this thing is happening with a cool picture, people will put that on their blog. Like everybody is trying to put content everywhere all the time. So we had that same list, and it was before we realized Nixon was interesting. So we were still doing like home movie enthusiasts and historians and archivists and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so that was the next phase, was just sending that blog ready, Twitter ready, you know, Facebook ready thing to all those people, most of whom we just literally pulled off the internet, like by Googling Home Movie Enthusiasts Association or something.
No, and you know, Penny just did an incredible job managing.
I stayed up all night, like
managing
every night.
that campaign, and I think that realization, it makes me sad every time I get an email or see a Facebook posting from someone saying, "We almost have enough money. Give us more money."
Please.
That's not a story. Okay? No one is interested in telling other people how you need money. They're interested in something interesting. And everyone knows what these campaigns are for. Everyone relevant to you knows if it's a Kickstarter, it means there's an opportunity to get involved, right? You need to give people a story that they want to tell other people about.
That's great. Yeah, the only not unique story is I'm a filmmaker and I need money. Like, oh, really? Like, oh, wow, that's a great story. Let's post that on our blog. Right, I really think that's important. Like, we really always had the attitude that we were not begging. That's not what we were doing. We were doing something really cool, and we were asking people to be a part of it. And I think that if you adopt the begging
people
mentality,
an opportunity to be a part of it.
Yeah, to be involved. And people were actually really excited to be involved and see early clips that no one else could see, and, you know, get cool merchandise that we had really been thoughtful about coming up with and all that kind of stuff.
More questions? Was it hard to know when it was done? And then the second part of that is, you know, in terms of how you decided to release it into the world, how did you figure out that strategy?
You know, weirdly, I don't think it was that hard to figure out when it was done. I feel like we were showing the cut in iterations, and I have like a kind of a philosophy of rough cut screenings, and I think luckily Francisco agreed with it. But you know, I don't like to do them too early at all, because when the movie's not in any way there, people are like, I don't know, you know, whatever. But we got to a point where we had very specific questions, and the first kind of round of rough cut screenings was for very young people, and we were specifically trying to find out, like, how much context do we need to add to this story? That was the only question we were asking at that point. So, you know, the typical younger person today, including myself, by the way, I'm not even that young, had no idea that Richard Nixon going to China was a big deal in 1972. I'm just gonna confess, I didn't know. I was like, they filmed a lot in China, like, really. And Brian was like, well, it's a big deal. Okay, so young people didn't know that. So we had to add news footage. People had to say, a newscaster had to say, like, this is a historic, momentous moment in order to understand why they were filming a lot in China. Anyway, so later rough cut screenings, as it got toward the end, basically, once we got to the point where we had 2 screenings in a row where all the feedback was the same, and we could answer to it, we're done. Like, and then there was a kind of a phase where the film was, and this is like kind of a more private thing, I guess, but there was a period where we got a lot of negative feedback, and then we had to have like a little crisis, like, well, do we stand by? I remember calling Francisco after crying for an hour.
This is a conversation that I have often with the director.
He's like totally prepared for this, right? He was like, well, we didn't get into the first festival we applied to. Like, we must have made a terrible movie. We should go back to the edit room. And then he was like, no, we stand by this. We know this is done.